So yeah, this is as raw gets, dude. This is not scripted. Welcome to the Transition Podcast, Chris. This is my pastor, or one of my pastors.
Yeah, son of the pastor.
And somebody that I respect, especially as a young man with a lot. You have a lot going for you. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, man.
And a part of me, as I've glanced through this book, and we're just gonna jump right into it, dude.
Do it, man.
All right. I haven't read the whole thing. Like I said, I've been pretty crazy busy and just with the kids at night and stuff like that. But I like to read at night, but I've glanced through it and I've picked and choose random like chapters.
Okay.
Right. And the one thing I identified last night was that there's no way, and I could be wrong, that you couldn't have written this book if at some point you didn't hit some sort of dark place.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I love being here. I love what you guys are doing on the transition, but I've been talking about that for years. So I love what you're doing, and athletes will know that it's really like 95% mental. And because of me, I am a pastor, work for my parents, Metro Life, and a lot of people look at my personality, kind of like yours, very extroverted, larger than life. Like, I'll fill any room. I feel like my personality is like a gas. It'll fill whatever chamber you put it in. But sometimes that can hide the fact that mentally you're going through stuff. And this book, Clickbait, it was born out of a time where I was going through my own transition. And man, it got hard. And as a man of faith, as a Christian, it seemed easy to mask it sometimes with faith, but then you go home, right? So this was really born out of one of the hardest times, but man, a time I'm really thankful for now.
In the front cover, which is pretty badass, by the way. But because of my podcast and because I know what it is to be in a dark place. This caught my attention and they always say don't judge the book by its cover, but it caught my attention because I'm like, so you write, win the war for your mind in the age of distraction. And I talk about distraction a lot because it's everywhere. The noise is so loud especially with social media and Instagram and Facebook and just life in general, 24-hour news.
Yeah.
It's a constant. It's a constant noise of, I don't know if the word is negativity or pessimism or doomsday, right? And it's hard, Chris, not to get caught up in that distraction, and it's hard in our human flesh, right? In our vulnerable human flesh, it's hard for it not to affect us sometimes. And you talk so much, and this is about you because I want you to share. This is. I think this is the book that's going to take you over the hump, in my opinion. Okay, I'm not an expert in books, but I'm just saying, when you read it, the fact that you tied in, you were real about it. And you weren't ashamed to reach into your biblical perspective and say, okay, like I think you collaborated it very well.
Thank you.
So somebody who maybe doesn't even practice their faith may understand that, and it may lead them to their faith. So let's talk about that time.
Yeah.
And when did you realize like that you were in that dark place, and why?
Well, the truth is the book's basically about just the voices in our life, right voices, right choices. And when you talk about distraction, there are more voices today than ever. I don't like talking about that kind of stuff, like harder than ever, more than ever, because the truth is it's like in sports, you can't compare eras. We can't compare, people 100 years ago, but still, I have a hard time saying that there aren't more voices than ever now with everything we got. And I heard this quote the other day. I wish I would have heard it before I wrote the book, but the real danger in all the social media world today, it's not that we'll abandon our faith. And for some people, it's faith in God. For others, it's just, faith in what they're trying to accomplish. It's that we'll become so distracted that we'll settle for a mediocre version of it. And that's kind of what I think the book addresses. And for some people, putting their faith away. But for me, my story came out of these weird beliefs that I didn't even realize I had that were like super subconscious, but they were there and they were driving a lot of my beliefs. So, for me, there was a grandfather I never met. And sadly, he started his life off real well and he ended it real poorly. And I never met him because of that. And around the time, my mom had just kind of said, hey, you remind me so much of him. Now, for whatever reason, I couldn't hear the compliment that she was giving me. I heard you're about to tell me that a man who ended his life poorly, I remind you of him. And then I had heard this thing earlier from somebody who was like, oh, I think spirits can jump on you. Just literally. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but that's what I heard. And I didn't even realize I had heard that. I wasn't having real conscious thoughts about what my mom said, but deep down it created this fear that there was a version of my future that absolutely sucked and I could not control it. That there was going to be a version of my future that was out of my hands, and it just, man, it's kind of like, Doctor Strange. I saw 1,000 possibilities, a million. I was seeing like there's a bunch of possibilities and they all look bad because my mom said, I remind her of this guy. Now, what I didn't know she meant was he was a phenomenal preacher. He was larger than life. He wrote songs that I hear today and did not know that he wrote them. I hear them and I lose it. He's got book and hymnals, man. But I heard something different. And it's crazy because those little beliefs put me in this place of fear. It put me in this like wrestling match of my mind all the time because I didn't feel like I could give myself what I wanted. I didn't feel like I could have peace. I'd go to church, I'd preach phenomenal things for other people, and then I'd go home and didn't even realize it, but subconsciously was believing that was for them, not me. Because and it really came down to this. It was like if you would have gone to my grandfather at 30 and asked him, hey, you think you're going to throw your life away? He probably would have said no, but he did. And that just created this fear. It was like this cyclical, circular logic that I just couldn't escape. And for like 4 or 5 months, man, it was, there's a bunch of guys in the room who knew me during that time and had no idea I was going through it. But I just thought my future wasn't in my hands. And of course, not only is it not in my hands, it's in God's, which is even better. But I came out of that season not only with a book, but with a belief that I am more in control of what I'm experiencing than I realize. And that was such a beautiful, free gift of confidence, but also of if something bad were to happen, something I can't control. Well, cool, I can control 95% of the other stuff, and I can pray and believe that God and myself can take that and make something beautiful out of it. So those thoughts, they were clickbait. Clickbait is defined as a headline or a tag that specifically tries to get you to click when the content has no value. And I don't think a lot of people realize, man, that they're thinking thoughts that have no value. They have bought into beliefs that have no value. They don't even know where they come. They probably couldn't even write them down on paper. But they're letting these thoughts with no value run their life. That's what I did. And luckily, I've been out of that. A great book came out of it, and I feel better than ever. But yeah, that's a little glimpse into that season for me.
It's crazy how, and we've talked about this a lot in this podcast room. I think that your thoughts determine the outcomes of your life.
Yeah, your life goes in the direction of your greatest thoughts.
There's no doubt. And sometimes, like, I don't know, I think we all get bad thoughts, right? It's like you can be driving down the highway and like, oh my God, I thought that you're gonna get in a car accident, and people panic and they freak out because of that. And I remember, I related to this, Chris, and the reason why I recognized that you were going through something was because I've gone through something.
Yeah.
And I've been in that dark place. And you can't write stuff like that unless you've been there. You know what I'm saying? And I can tell you that, I think we really underestimate what it is to renew your mind. I don't think we've humanly taken a step back to really understand that the battlefield is in your mind. Like if you can take a step back and figure out how to control your mind, I now believe when Christ says you will do greater things than I. Because it all starts in the mind. It all starts with a thought, right? And I think that the darkness begins when we grab that thought that is not healthy for us, and we run with it because we make it real.
Yeah.
Right? We think it's real. Like you thought at one point, like, wow, like I'm gonna end up like my grandpa. And I can relate to that because I grew up and I saw alcohol and drugs get really good people. No, I'm serious. Like people that were loving, like, and dry them up and like a cactus, dude. Like they're empty, right? And you look back and you're like, what happened? Like that was like a good, yes, like exactly.
If Brady and Giselle can get divorced,
So that's funny, but it's true. Like, but I sometimes I look at those thoughts sometimes and I'm like, okay, like maybe that was a healthy fear for you. Maybe that was also a fear that, and we'll talk about that. Like, does God allow the fear? Does the thought come from the devil? You know what I'm saying? Like, or maybe it's just, I think fear needs to exist, right? I think it's here for a reason. Like, hey, if you're crossing the street, then maybe you should have a little fear that if you don't look both ways, you're probably going to get hit by a car, right? I think it's when the fear starts to dominate you that you get in trouble. But maybe that season maybe also made you realize that, I have to be careful.
Yeah.
Like as you grow, you're in the limelight, right? like you are a pastor, you're somebody that people know. And I saw the clip with Mike Tyson just came out. I actually showed it to your dad the other night. He laughed at me. But Mike Tyson just put out a little clip and he said in the clip, he says, if you're highly favored by God, and I don't know if this is biblical, Chris, or it's in the Bible, but,
okay.
but it sounds great, okay?
It sounds great.
You're probably highly favored by the devil. And the way I looked at it was like, dude, like when things start to go well in your life and when there is, it's like in Yellowstone when James Dutton looks at his son Jamie and he's like, son, I'm gonna teach you one thing. Where there's something really good trying to happen, there's somebody really bad trying to take it away. And that's the truth. Like, it's hard to achieve a high level of success and not at some point face some sort of mountain or some sort of like, we'll call it challenge. Yeah. And I know you mentioned mountain here.
There's a lot in there.
I know. And I think you changed my outlook on what that mountain, which,
Well, here's one of the things that I think are interesting. And I thought about this in the drive here because, this podcast understands this concept more than I think the average reader does. But I remember back in football practice, I had a coach, Gus Johnson, that man, larger than life. And we had finished 2-a-days. It was Miami Heat that apparently the Bills suddenly have the right to complain about more than anybody else. And we were dying. And right at the end, he calls this kid over from like the soccer team. And he's like, hey, pick a number between 50 and 100. And the kid's like 77. I'll never forget 77. Because he's like, great, we're ending practice today with 77 110s. So, bro, we just start running and run.
That's a lot of 110s, dude.
I will never forget, because first of all, I'm like, I'm going to find that kid. But second of all, like, I remember we were running and he kept screaming, don't feel sorry for yourself. Don't feel sorry for yourself. And this is where I was like, is he insane? Does he not see what's going on? But I started to realize, as I started to write the book and was going through my own thing, I started to realize more and more, when we get tired, we focus on ourselves so much. What he was trying to do was he was trying to get us out of focusing on how we felt and more on what we were trying to accomplish.
Wow.
But we were so caught up in self. The Mike Tyson clip that you said, it interests me because, you know, we think that the similarity is highly favored. But if he really was to pay attention, the similarity would be the focus on self, that I'm highly favored by God or I'm highly favored by the enemy. And I think what happens is we create this world where I'm the main character of this story. And because we are the main character of our own life, or we're the main character of our family as you know, the head of the household or the business, we create this world where my life is living is experiencing something different than everybody else's. And so we cover ourselves with like this like gold halo of people pay attention to me more, people see me more. And so if God does, the enemy does too. But we don't realize that that's actually playing into the self-pity. It's playing into the focus on the self, both recognizing how favored we are by God and how hard we have it. We start to focus on ourselves so much. And I actually don't know if it's biblically accurate to say the devil can ramp up his attempts at an individual more than someone else. But what I do think is the only tool in his tool belt, the only one, is lying. The devil can't kill you. The devil can't strike you with disease. Even the one time in Scripture where technically he's like allowed to, he had to ask God's permission. And I don't think he can do that, but look at all he's accomplished with just lies. That's it. And we don't think lies are a big deal, but look at what the enemy has accomplished just by lying, man. So when I think of that, when I start to focus on myself, when I start to look at myself, good or bad, man, buying my own headlines or feeling sorry for myself, I can't distinguish the truth from the lies easy. And then I play right into his hands, and then I feel like there's this ramped up focus of negativity in my life. And I'm like, where's that coming from? So I create a source like, oh, the devil's in his lair and he's got me on his board. It's like, nah, man, like the devil's not after me. He's after God. Like, I actually say this because one of the things that this also came from was a need to have to wake up every single day and tell myself what I would think. I no longer go into days with let's just see what happens. I have a whole list of things that I say to myself daily. And one of those is, remember, the enemy doesn't oppose you. He opposes the work. And when you look at, this is what's more biblical. There's a word in the Bible called a remnant. It means when all is lost, the remnant is what's left. And there are so many times where God's people are destroyed, God's temple is destroyed, or whatever. But there's always a remnant. There's always somebody that can bring it back. So what I try to tell myself is, hey, if I lose it, if Pastor Chris Alessi loses it and does what my grandfather did, here, God put me on the earth to do something and I failed. The enemy didn't win because Christian will rise up and do it. Because Johnny will rise up and do it. That remnant will come up behind me and do it. So wait a minute, if the attack isn't about me, if the attack is more on the work, then it might as well be me that does it. It might as well, because somebody else is going to, so it might as well be me. And when I do that, I take myself out of the focus of the whole thing, and suddenly the focus is back on God. And that's a battle that I realized, like, yo, it's kind of like that college, whenever there's a really good college team and a really bad NFL team all at the same time, we always start to say, yo, you think Bama could beat Detroit? When you release, and we sit back and go, no, there's no way. In the same way, when you make the battle really about who the battle's about, it's not about me. it's about God, and it's about his enemy, I realize the enemy may be a great college team, but God, he could never, ever take God out. So that's when I can put the battlefield there and realize it's not about me. Good, bad, it's not about me. Even the attack I feel, it's just about what I'm trying to accomplish. I remove the personal from the attack, and suddenly, I'm telling you, you'll get like 50% of your energy back just by realizing that. And this actually came from a time where my dad busted my door down when I used to live with him, and we weren't even fighting. We weren't even talking. Busted the door down and it's just like, you're not going to do anything if you can't stop making your life about you. And I'm just like sitting there. I think I was playing Madden, and I'm like, I'm going to have a hard time contemplating what you just said to me, but it has lived with me. So I know I said a lot there, but I will say, man, if someone's listening, just make your life about, God, make your life about what you're trying to accomplish and get yourself out of it. So.
And I like what you said about, I've never thought about it this way. It's about the work. And it's true because like, if you're going to be blessed to glorify God and you're going to be so concerned about what others think or what they don't think or whether or not they're happy for you or not happy for you, someone will figure out a way to be blessed by God and not allow any of that to bother them.
Yeah. Somebody will do it.
If
God's ultimate goal, and
someone's always doing it.
Yeah. Somebody may always, when you think about the story of Elijah, which I reference in the book, bro, this guy got to a mindset somehow. His believed reality was on the whole planet, he was the only prophet of God left. That's what he believed. God tells him later on, I have 7,000 more. If this incredible prophet can conceive reality to the degree where he's that off, where there's 7,000 more, and he thought he was alone, how much more am I capable of misperceiving the reality of what's going on in my world? So, Fernie, for you, man, the work, while it's a lot about what you're doing here on the transition and JAG and all that, the truth is the work is more about your family, the father, God has never called a CEO. He's never called a leader, but he is called a father. When you look at it, out of all the guys in this room right now, you're the only one who shares a title with God. Father. That's the work the enemy's after, not this. In fact, the enemy would love, and I know we're talking about it a lot, but the enemy would love for this company to do great to the point where it destroys your family. He'd love that. The enemy's not trying to get us to like completely become those like witchcraft people who have like, I hate God tattooed all over our bodies. He's trying to make us think that we're doing right when we aren't. That's what he's trying to do. So when I think about the work, it's not the work of the books I'm writing. It's not the work of, the things I'd like to accomplish in my life. It's the work of being a good husband, of being a model of Christ to the bride. It's about being a good pastor to people, and not good in the sense of the numbers of the church are growing, but in the sense that I can sit here with people that have known me my whole life, and they look at me and say, that's a guy who's loved me. That's a guy who's challenged me. That's a guy who kicked me out of the boat when I needed to be kicked out, but brought me back in when it was time. Like, whatever it is, like, that's a guy who took his life seriously and took the standard he taught seriously. That's the work the enemy's after. And someone's going to do that, like you said.
Someone's going to do it.
So it might as well be me. Yeah,
I'm with you. And, I will say this. When you talk about someone's going to do the work and attacks, and this may be a little bit out of the book, what are your thoughts when we, and this is something that I've had to do and create, and I'll be honest with you, it was painful, hard, led to guilt, but it's proven to work. And what I mean to work, it allowed me to get myself in a healthy mindset, in a healthy environment, in a healthy I hate to use the word me, but a better version of myself where then I can become the dad and the father and the friend and the boss and you know, a servant of God in a better way was having boundaries. And how do you feel about that? Because like, I feel like boundaries don't feel good. I don't think they're meant to feel good, by the way. But in certain instances in your life, you have to make a decision, right? Like when you're not in around people that are in the same mindset or not even after the same dreams, but like looking for that, for a better life. Just when you, because I get confused sometimes. I'm like, is that wrong? Is it, you know, is it wrong sometimes to say no to people that you even love?
I've been thinking about this lately.
And I know it sounds.
No, it doesn't sound bad, because the truth is, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'll show you how this connects. But you know, the story of the prodigal son is a story that even non-Christians have heard. People that, you know, they've all heard that story. And I think about this, when that son came to himself and realized, like, yo, I have to go back. What if his dad would have moved? Like, what if his dad would have moved away? Just, I like a house over there. What if his dad would have left the house to go look for him? He would have no idea where to find his dad. He'd have no idea where to go. He wouldn't know how to get home. I think boundaries, you're only as good as your boundaries. I think the father had to have boundaries so his son would know where to find him. If he didn't have the boundaries of a landscape, he wouldn't know where to find his father when he needed him. I think our boundaries are kind of the same way. If you're constantly changing your boundaries, the people that you genuinely love really don't know where to find you. Like, you're thinking about it, like, I know what you're saying. Like, I've kind of had to make certain boundaries in my life in order to protect my peace or protect my faith or protect my family. And you feel like that there's people lost in that because they don't believe like you, or they're not good for you, or you get around them and you don't like the effect that they have on you. And you feel like they're almost this like lost collateral. Like, in order for me to be my best self, I have to move on from them. But then you're like altruistic desire on the inside of you to be good to all people. Like, there's dissonance there because you're like, but I'm cutting this person off. But if I don't, I can't take care of myself. Well, the truth is, the best possible way to love that person is to have your boundaries. Because when they come to themselves and they decide they want to be the best versions of themselves too, they'll know where to find you. Because you have set up boundaries. It's like, man, and tell me one sport that would survive without boundaries. Tell me bowling right now. Could anybody bowl if you were allowed to bowl from where you were on any lane? You can't. You need those boundaries. And so, believe it or not, the solutions part of the book that I write towards the back half, I present all of them like they're tires. And I hope it's understood well when people read it, because the truth is, there are some things in order. It's like, okay, when you look at a car, the most expensive thing on that car is not the tires. But everything else can work. Everything else can work in that car. And if you don't have 4 good working tires, that car is basically an AC box. Like, that's it. Without 4 working tires, the car doesn't achieve what it's supposed to. You could have 3 perfect ones if you don't have 4. So there are 4 things that I present in the book. And I'm like, look, they're not the most expensive things in your life. They're not the best possible things, the best possible solutions. But I just don't know somebody that can succeed in life without these 4 things. And people aren't going to like them. I'll be honest with you. 2 of them, I'll just tell you. You don't even have to read the book. I'll just tell you, it's a good church with a good pastor. Like, and you commit forever to that good church and that good pastor. And people would say, what if something bad happens or whatever? And I sit back and think, to be honest, man, even picking a good pastor and a good church are boundaries. Even that, you're saying, I'm going to err on the side of honesty, loyalty, dedication. and I'm going to stay here. So my kids know ultimately where to find me. Because if I'm constantly on the move, from leader to leader to leader, from place to place to place, then when my kids fall, you know what they're going to say? Dad couldn't figure it out.
I find it no different than a kid in a travel baseball team who's constantly leading one team to the other and blaming the coach.
Blaming the coach.
But what are you teaching your kid? That when things don't work out his way, he can just bounce?
He can just bounce. This is exactly, boundaries are the only way we survive. It's the only way. I've erred on the side, and these guys have heard me say this before. I got two men in my life. One is my pastor. He's also my father. The other is my my youth pastor growing up. I mean, hasn't been my youth pastor since I was 17, but he was my youth pastor for the majority of my young life. He's still in my life today. He's still on staff with us at church. I say if those two men agree on anything, if they came to me and said, the Lord told us, Chris, for the sake of the gospel, you got to cut your right arm off. I'd be like, all right, where's the saw, man? Because I have decided, I've made this decision to get to heaven, to get to judgment day. And if God's like, why'd you do that? I would rather err on the side of saying I was listening to the godly leaders that I chose for myself, but also I felt you chose for me. I've erred on the side of honoring that boundary. And I think one of the reasons why we have the mess we have right now in the world is because people are literally trying to remove boundaries, thinking they're helping people. But it is boundaries that actually help us long term. We've all seen areas where maybe you help somebody today, but you hurt them tomorrow by helping them today. And I see a lot of that. When we get rid of our boundaries, we may help somebody right now, but we're hurting them in the long run. And it's not even the far long run. It's like a year from now. It's like in 2 weeks I hurt them. So I think you're actually onto something real strong there. Like, it's the airplane metaphor. When that airplane starts to have an issue, what do they always tell you? You put your mask on first. Your boundaries are helping you say, if I'm not working, I can't help anybody else work.
Yeah, and I look at it as you have to be healthy, right? I have to be emotionally healthy and at my best for me to be a value add to you and to be a good friend for you. Yeah. And I think so many people struggle with first of all, it's not I'm not saying that's an easy decision, right? But it's a decision that at some point in your life, if you do want to achieve your God-given dreams and your God, I believe that the desires in your heart are God's proof that it's already yours.
Yeah.
They're
there.
They're there for a reason, right? And you know the good from the bad.
That's really good, Fernie. That's really good. Just the fact that they're there is proof. They're yours.
They're yours.
Wow.
They're yours. That's why they're there. And I, but I think and I don't know, I haven't seen, again, I haven't read everything on there, but I think, Chris, we live, and even as Christians, right? We have this, you're a Christian. Shouldn't you be forgiving? And shouldn't you be like Jesus? But as I've read, and again, I'm not a pastor, but I'm being fed by the best, and I listen. If I've read correctly, even Christ had boundaries. Christ left certain environments in this fleshly way because he was like, dude, I'm tired. People are exhausting me. Let me go catch a breather. That's the way I look at it. Like, I got to roll. Like, this town you guys are nuts. You're not listening. So I got to go, and then you guys will figure it out, One of the most bone-chilling things to believe, to understand, is that Jesus preached messages and ended them by saying, let he who has ears, let him hear. And what he literally meant was, I know there are people who aren't hearing this. And if you really think about it, if you want to take that whole theory of like, shouldn't you be forgiving? Shouldn't you be that? Shouldn't Jesus do whatever he can to make people listen? Like, to get people to listen? Shouldn't there were whole towns, I think, more realistic than Jesus saying, yo, y'all nuts. Although he did say some crazy stuff to people, like, how wicked are you and how long do I have to be here? But multiple towns ran Jesus out of town. Multiple towns begged him to leave. And
if you try to really think about it, like, don't you think the Messiah, the Son of God, the all loving, all forgiving, all grace would be like, no, guys, please, like, listen, he let people reject him. He let people reject him. He did. He let people choose to not believe. And if Jesus would choose to let people not believe, the truth is, by setting boundaries, you're not rejecting people. You're really choosing to let people reject you. That's the reality of you setting boundaries. You're not rejecting them. You're giving them permission to reject you.
That's gold.
I mean, I think it's true. Because, I'm not going to go hang out where we used to hang out and now suddenly I'm chopped liver?
Correct.
What? I didn't make that judgment. You did. I mean, what? Because I don't want to use certain language, or I don't want to spend, 2/5 of my freaking paycheck on alcohol for no reason, or I want to honor my wife? You're going to make it seem like there's something wrong with wanting to honor my wife? You're choosing to reject me. I'm not rejecting you. And so I think choosing to let people reject you, and it's kind of crazy, I didn't mean for this, but it's in common line and theme with the prodigal son. With the father didn't reject the son. He allowed the son to reject him. And when we're choosing to do things right, honor God, really we're choosing to let people reject us. And we're choosing to love them in spite of it. The fact that you're on your podcast in your building that you built, and you're using any of the airtime to process through the hurt feelings of others because you decided to pursue a better life for yourself, shows whatever you're believing they could think about you is not true. Oh, he forgot about us. No, you didn't. You're using your airtime to talk about them. Oh, he doesn't care. Yes, you do. You're using your airtime to talk about that. They're really the ones that chose to reject you. So I think boundaries are like a linchpin, man. Without them, there was never a structure. It's not like, if you don't set boundaries, your structure will fall. It's like without boundaries, there was never a structure. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking to somebody, and I just happened to say, I don't like that person's integrity. They don't have integrity. And they thought what I meant by that at the time was they do bad things. And I was like, we couldn't really communicate that well that day. So I kind of left, and I just processed, and I was like, did I use the wrong word? Did I hurt that person? And then it was like, no, integrity isn't just like I do the right things. It's I have built a way of acting, believing, thinking, doing that you can build off of. And what I was saying to that person is, I don't think this other person is a foundation or is a structure you can build on. And boundaries, they help us with our integrity, man. They help us be that structure we can build on. So I'll stop talking now because I'll keep going.
No, and dude, I'm again, I wanted to ask you because I respect you, and I can only imagine that you have to have boundaries, right? Even, with what you do every single day, you listen to a lot of probably unhealthy things that are going on. So I would dare to say that it can become exhausting on you, and even though that you're a pastor and you're called to preach the word of God, I think it's important that if people want to have the best Chris on Sunday, like Chris needs to have time to himself. Chris needs to have time to process, grieve, and maybe this week, I'm not available all the time. And I'm not saying that when I read certain things, I don't think God wasn't available, but I'm just saying when Jesus was in his what I told you yesterday, I had this is completely off topic now. I had this, I was driving to work yesterday, and I had this I've had a couple things going on, right? And this is the first podcast I do since our acquisition, right? And I needed to I needed time to just rest and bounce back and because between what I do every single day in a very challenging market and the acquisition and it was a lot. But man, what I have learned from April 1st to today is like, dude, like, and I don't mean this in a self-pity way, actually, but it confirms. I have a buddy of mine who played Major League Baseball, and he sat me down in his boat a couple years ago, and he said to me, "Listen to me, you're in the right path, and I feel like you're gonna have an explosion of blessings, but I need you to be ready for that." And I was like, "What do you mean, dude?" He's like, "You have no idea."
The burden of blessing.
And what a lonely place success can be.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, nobody ever asks that successful guy how he's doing. Because they put you in a box. He's got to figure it out. He's made millions of dollars. He lives in a beautiful home, but nobody asks that guy. It's much easier to ask a guy who doesn't look like he's doing great. Are you doing all right? But nobody ever asks. You know, that guy who's running the company, "Hey, bro, you okay?" And the answer is sometimes you're not.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
And you also learn through this process that, dude, you know what? Some people are not going to be happy for you. And they're not nice to you. And you're like, yo, like, what did I do wrong? I just, like, I thought we were like, what does one thing have to do with the other? I'm still the same guy. I love baseball. I love going to church, hanging out with you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And it's taught me, and that could be a podcast for a whole different topic. But what I will say is that, and maybe I'm telling you this for a reason now, successes can be lonely.
Yeah.
You know, when I go skiing sometimes in Snowmass, and like I've done, like my buddy Nate, he's an amazing skier and I'm not, but I just athletically
You figure it out.
Figure myself out, and I go into places outside of my boundaries. So, and one of the things I remember like 3 years ago was like, dude, like the air is really thin up here. So I felt like I was a little hyperventilating. And I'm like, dude, that's like success. Like you get to the top of the mountain sometimes and you look around, you're like, yo, I'm up here by myself in some instances and I can't breathe. I'd rather go back. It's easier to be in the lower side of the mountain.
Yep.
It's easy.
And it's true of going deep too, by the way. The deeper you go in the water, the more pressure there is, the harder it is to exist. So higher and deeper.
Yeah, you're right. And it's like, it's much easier to just want to go through the motions of life and, you know, versus like, again, God plants a dream in your heart and you're like, I'm going to go get this. Because I don't know how you feel about this, but like, I know God's in control. Like I believe that. And I don't know that I can even articulate what that means, right? I'll be honest with you. Because it's like, again, I go back to, I'm an athlete at heart. Like, okay, I want to become a Major League Baseball player. And I want to become a professional hitter. That means I got to get up at 5 a.m. I got to get into the weight room. I got to hit off the tee. I got to take front toss. I got to hit live VP. And I got to face live pitching. Every day I need reps and reps and reps and reps and reps. You know, Cole, we talked about after 10,000 reps, it's kind of like where your brain and your body connects. But you have to do the work. Yeah. Like, I can say, oh, God's in control, so let me just turn on the tube, and I don't know, you become a better hitter just by saying God's in control. I have no idea. I don't think so. If someone, you know.
Well, consider this for a second.
You know?
God's first word, let there be light, is still it's still creating, right? God created everything by his voice. Everything. It's still creating. They say the environment, like the atmosphere, all that still growing. Still, okay, awesome. If I sit on my butt and do nothing, is anything being created in my life? No. So, even though God's original commands, his original let there be, is still creating, there's still an onus on me to create as well. God is in control. God gave me control as well. It's kind of like, do you want anybody that you've given delegated authority to here? Do you want them to act like, even though they have delegated authority, they have to ask you every single thing?
No.
It's like, no, I gave you delegated authority to use it. Doesn't mean it's theirs. It's ultimately yours. But you still want them to use it. So yeah, God's in control, but he gave me control. Not that I can somehow out-control him, but I have to use what he gave me. And I'll speak to what you said, man. There's some beauty to what you said. One of the things that I reference as one of the 4 tires is an elevated focus, which basically means, believe it or not, it's like step up to the plate. That's the point. Like, one of the things is you have to realize I have to step up to the plate. I don't think there are a lot of people struggling up here who step up to the plate and say, all right, I'm going to fight it. Let's go. You know, like a quarterback. I use a quarterback because I'm more of a football fan. But when you think about it, there's a lot for them to focus on. A lot. 11 dudes are trying to take their head off. They have to know the assignments of every single player. Man, you watched that Thursday night game last night, you realized those quarterbacks didn't really know what was going on. The quarterback needs to be aware of everything, but a good coach comes in and says, just focus on your footwork, draw back, step into the throw, release. It's like that whole Peyton Manning flick the booger thing we saw growing up as kids. It was, you focus on that. Don't focus on the defense. Step up, focus on your footwork. I think a lot of people don't realize that God wants to give you the promised land, like every time. It's the promised land, meaning like it's already been promised to you, right? It's like the whole desire of your heart thing you're saying. It's already yours. It's already theirs. But they have to, first of all, they have to find it. Second of all, they have to get to it, and then they have to fight the giants in it. And I think what you're talking about right now is you're recognizing the giants in the promised land. This new success that was yours from the beginning, but there are giants here. And a lot of people don't step up to that. They think that the giants are a sign that something is wrong. But do you realize that if you were to drive anywhere else in the country, not Miami because it doesn't happen here, right now, almost all the trees would be dead. Almost all the trees would be dead. But that doesn't mean that's a sign that something is wrong. It's just a sign of the season. If you and I see a tree here with no leaves, we're like, oh, it died, something's wrong. But everywhere else in the world, it's just a sign of the season. Giants aren't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that this is a promised land. You got to go take those giants out. This is your thing. And so I want to go back to the very first thing you said, because you talked about you haven't done a podcast in a while, right? Well, do you know when God gave the original law to the Israelites, one of the things that he did was he instituted a Sabbath, a weekly Sabbath, right? So every single week you rest because God did. He's like, so every week you take a break. We've completely thrown that out. We're like, I don't need rest. I am losing when I'm resting.
Yeah, I hate when people tell me no days off.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so stupid.
You're like, no, that's dumb. The grind never ends until it completely ends and you can't grind anymore. But the other thing that's crazy, though, is that there's a much more macro version of the Sabbath, which is where God said every 7 years, let the land rest for a year. Mm-hmm. Every 7 years, let the land rest. Like, don't plant anything. Don't sow anything. Let the land rest. And we've completely forgotten the value of just, okay, let me settle in. Yo, I've got giants I got to go fight. There's a whole level of success. Let me just take this all in for a second. Let me slow down. Let me focus on my footwork. Let the land breathe a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. You see, you feel like at the competitive podcast, they're putting out episodes all the time. But that's why they have a 3-year window and they stop. If we're going to have a good life over the long haul, right? It's described as a race in Scripture all the time. It's like run the race with endurance. And sometimes that means you're resting. You're taking some time to let yourself make sense of things. I think you were wise to say, as I'm stepping into something new, let some things rest a little bit. People don't do that. You know what I can't stand? People come to church, they get their lives right for a couple of months, and then they're like quick to start dating. And it's like, well, you just let it rest a little bit. Give it time. Time is one of the things we take advantage of and yet never realize we have. We take advantage of it in the sense that we really never wake up and thank God for a new day. We never really realize we weren't promised today. We make plans for next Tuesday all the time, not thinking anything. We take advantage of time, yet we never realize we have time.
And that is probably rooted in some place of fear. There's a fear, right? Or there's a stronghold on fear that tells you there isn't enough time.
Jeez.
And I feel like I maybe...
You heard what LeBron said recently on whatever his show he does? I don't like LeBron, but you already said?
What?
He took the blame for the 2011 finals because he said he was so in his head the Heat basically played without him. Because he was so in his head.
Wow.
Goes to what you're saying.
It's like when you watch Jordan back in the day, or you watch Tiger Woods hit an 18-foot putt in the Masters. I mean, guys, you realize it's just big, right? And it's a little ball, and it's like, dude, that guy, tunnel vision, you know? And I guess we'll end it with this. The road is narrow, very narrow. And I think I understand that more today, maybe because I'm married, I have 2 kids, I've gotten my butt kicked a lot, like I've made so many mistakes, I've failed a lot, but I've also started to win a lot. But it took a lot of pain, and I don't even know, I'm not cool with the word failing no more. It was almost like maybe I was just learning.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can't learn to win the game if you haven't lost, right? Because you can make adjustments when you lose, right? But if all you do is win, then like you're kind of like, you know, like you don't know.
McDaniel said it. You heard what he said going into the Ravens game or after the Ravens game?
No.
Because the game against the Patriots was somewhat easy, I guess. He says, I told the team before the Ravens game, I said, I hope we have some adversity today. And that's the game where they're down like 28. And he's like, I guess they took me seriously.
Yeah. No, but that's how you learn how to win, right? And what I will say is the road to the abundant life, the road to success, it's narrow. It's narrow. And the one thing I've learned in my life, and I am 1,000, I'm anchored on this, and probably this is my biggest gift, is that it takes discipline and obedience to get to where you want to go. Because it's easy to come off that narrow road, and it takes sacrifice. Like there's just no way around it. Like you've got, and it's like wanting to be a good Christian and love God. It's, you know, it takes a conscious effort. Now I will say, and I talked to you about this yesterday. Something hit me. I guess this will keep going for a little bit. You said it's not about me.
Yeah.
I always talk about that. I that's something that I said. It's not about me. Like it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. But one thing is talking about, and one thing is about living it. I don't know what happened to me yesterday, but I'm like, I've been in this like transition, let's call it, like facing a lot of noise, right? And just dealing with it from a place of peace. And I don't know why yesterday, I can tell you why yesterday, but I went to the cross. Okay? And I told Chris and I told John yesterday, dude, I've never ever like thought about this. I went to the cross. And I'm like, what happened that day? Like, what happened in that time? What happened that day?
It made me cry.
And I felt like I was driving, I'm talking to Tito, and we shared some stuff. And I just had this image in my head of the cross and like what happened that day. And I looked at God like I'm looking at you. Like my boy. Like I humanized him. I humanized him. And I looked at a guy who's my boy who loves me and who has no malice, no ill intent, no selfishness, nothing other than love. Like you're my boy, like I love you, right? Like I love my son, like the way that I love Olivia and Sean. And I'm like, dude, like that guy was like, yo, like I'm gonna die for you. And I'm like, I may pretend like I'm having a glass of wine with him. Like I'm having a drink with him. Like I'm having a glass of wine. What do you mean? Bro, I'm gonna die for you, dude. And I need to die for you. My dad wants me to die for you. And I'm like, talking to this guy, I'm like, no, you don't need to do that. He said, no, but you don't understand how much I love you. And if I don't do this, you guys are pretty much doomed. And I was just like, this guy, my boy, who I love, right? But I'm not like him, is gonna like literally, I know this doesn't sound really bad, but it's almost like, God, I don't want to use this word, bro. But it's almost like, like I'm gonna jump off the building, like I'm out.
No, he gave himself for us. They didn't take his life, he gave it.
Okay?
Yep.
So that I could live, man. And live freely through him.
Yep.
So that whenever I feel like I'm not good enough or I don't deserve something, I could just look at him and be like, dog, I did it for you.
Yeah.
He never made it about him.
Not once.
So I appreciate you. Where do you find clickbait?
Amazon. We got paperback, we got Kindle, we got the Audible. It is my lovely voice if you like it. It's right there. But yeah, man, it's all on Amazon.
Well, this book is going to be a blessing.
Appreciate that, man.
Amen. And, I love that I feel like you've taken that pain and like, no different than when you ran 77 110s. And said, all right, pull me through spiritual training so I can come out and win a championship.
Yeah.
So.
There you go, man. Thanks for having me on today.
Congrats. Thank you.